Disclaimer.
The songs you sing might be traps.
My name is Tapelo Katero Mokoena. I am 36 years old. I died for 13 minutes on June 22, 2024 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Thousands lifted their hands when I sang. Pastors called me anointed. Young musicians wanted to be like me before I begin. If God brought you here, subscribe and stay with me. For years, I stood on stages across this country leading worship. My voice echoed through sanctuaries in Sandton, Soweto, Pretoria, Cape Town. My songs played on every gospel radio station from Metro FM to Lesedi FM. I had everything I thought I wanted: the recognition, the contracts, the influence. But deep inside, beneath all the lights and applause, I was rotting. I was dying spiritually, and I knew it. I had made a choice 13 years ago that I told myself was just business, just an opportunity, just a way to open doors faster. But it was not business. It was a covenant, and the price was my soul. I was 23 when I met him, a producer, well known in the industry. He had worked with some of the biggest names in South African gospel music. He approached me after a worship night at my church in Soweto and told me I had a gift that could go global. He said he saw something special in me. He invited me to a private mentorship session at a studio in Rosebank. I went. I was hungry. I was ambitious. I wanted more than playing keyboard for a small congregation. I wanted the world to hear my sound. So I followed him. And that night, everything changed. The session was not in a studio. It was in a house. Dark, quiet. There were 6 other people there. Musicians I recognized, producers, singers. They did not speak much. The man who invited me led me to a back room where candles were burning, and the air smelled like incense mixed with something bitter. And he told me this was an initiation, that if I wanted to rise in the industry, I had to be aligned with the right forces. He said the church world was controlled by spiritual gates, and only those who knew how to unlock them would succeed. I should have left. I should have run. But I did not. I stayed, and I drank what they gave me. It tasted like ash and copper. It burned my throat. My head spun. I felt my body go light, like I was floating. And then I heard her voice, soft, seductive, whispering my name, Siphokazi. That was her name, a female voice that wrapped around my mind like silk. She told me she would help me. She would give me melodies no one else could hear. She would make me unforgettable. All I had to do was let her in. And I did. I said yes. I nodded. I agreed. And in that moment, I felt something enter me. Not physically, but spiritually. Something cold. Something that did not belong. I left that house different. I went home and could not sleep for 3 days. But within 2 weeks, I wrote a song that became a hit across every church in Gauteng. Everyone said it was anointed. They said God was using me. But I knew the truth. It was not God. It was her. The years that followed were a blur of stages, studios, and secrets. I wrote song after song. Some became anthems. Churches sang them every Sunday. Choirs recorded them. But I was not writing alone. Siphokazi was always there. I would sit at my keyboard at 2 in the morning, and melodies would come to me that I did not create. Hooks that felt too perfect. Rhythms that moved people in ways I could not explain. And the more I wrote, the more popular I became. But the more popular I became, the emptier I felt. I could not pray anymore. When I tried to open my Bible, my hands would shake. I would read a verse and feel nothing. I attended church, but I was just performing. I sang about the presence of God, but I had not felt him in years. The coven met twice a month, always at night, always in different locations. Bryanston, Santon, Midrand, sometimes outside the city in places I did not recognize. We would gather, about 15 of us, all musicians, all involved in the church music industry, and we would receive assignments. They called it planting seeds. We were told which churches to target, which songs to release, which melodies to use. They taught us how to take secular rhythms, beats from kwaito, amapiano, house music, and repackage them with Christian lyrics. The words sounded holy, but the spirit behind the sound was not. Yet we were told that every song carries a frequency, and certain frequencies open doors in the spiritual realm. If we could get believers to sing these songs, we could create soul ties, redirect their worship, and drain their spiritual energy without them ever knowing. I wrote songs that sounded like freedom but carried bondage. Songs that felt like praise but pulled people away from true intimacy with God. And it worked. I watched people sing my music, with tears streaming down their faces, hands lifted high, convinced they were encountering God. But I knew what was really happening. I could see it in the spirit sometimes, especially late at night when I was alone. I would see shadows moving in my apartment. I would hear whispers that were not my thoughts. I would wake up with scratches on my arms that I did not remember getting, but I was being used, and I was too afraid to stop. The coven had warned me. If I broke the covenant, I would lose everything: my career, my mind, my life. So I stayed silent. I kept writing. I kept performing. I kept pretending. But inside, I was dying. I could not look at myself in the mirror anymore. I avoided my mother because I knew she would see it in my eyes. I stopped visiting my old church in Soweto because the guilt was too heavy. I drank to numb the fear. I worked obsessively to avoid the silence. And at night, when the music stopped and the crowds went home, I would lie in bed and feel something sitting on my chest. A weight, a presence. And I knew I was not free. I knew I was bound. I knew I had traded my soul for fame. And I did not know how to get it back. It happened on a Saturday night, June 22nd, 2024. I was alone in my home studio in Santon, working on a new song that was supposed to be released the following Sunday at one of the largest churches in Johannesburg. The track was almost finished. The melody was catchy. The lyrics sounded worshipful. But I knew the truth. I had received the assignment 3 weeks earlier at a coven meeting in a house in Bryanston. They told me this song needed to be planted in at least 5 major churches before the end of the month. They said the rhythm I was using had roots in a ritual chant, and that once believers sang it repeatedly, it would create an open door for spirits of confusion and spiritual slumber to enter their homes. I did not question it anymore. I just did what I was told. I had been working since 10 that night. My fingers moved across the keyboard, adjusting the bass line and tweaking the vocal layers. Siphokazi was there. I could feel her. She always showed up when I was creating. Sometimes I would hear her voice in my head, guiding me. Sometimes I would feel a cold presence standing behind me. That night, she was close. Too close. I could smell something faint in the air, something like burnt flowers. My chest felt tight, but I ignored it. I had felt strange for weeks. Headaches, dizziness, a constant pressure in my chest. But I pushed through. I had deadlines. I had expectations. I had a reputation to maintain. At 2:14 in the morning, I played the song back one last time. The hook was perfect. It would get stuck in people's heads. They would sing it in their cars, in their showers, during their quiet time. And every time they sang it, they would be reinforcing an agreement they did not even know they were making. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. And then, without warning, a sharp pain exploded in my chest. It felt like something inside me had torn open. I gasped. My left arm went numb. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled beneath me. I collapsed onto the floor, my face hitting the cold tiles. The music was still playing in the background. The loop repeated over and over. I tried to reach for my phone, but my hand would not move. My vision blurred. My breath became shallow, broken. And then it stopped. My heart stopped. The pain stopped. Everything stopped. But I was still awake. I could still see. I could still hear. I looked down and saw my body lying on the floor, motionless, eyes half open, mouth slightly parted. I tried to speak, but no sound came. And I tried to move, but I had no body to move. Panic shot through me. I was outside of myself. I was separate. The studio looked the same, but everything felt different. The air was heavier. The light was dimmer. And then I felt it. A pull. Not from above, not from below, but from behind me. Something was dragging me backward, away from my body, away from the room, away from everything I knew. I tried to resist. I tried to scream, but the force was too strong. The studio disappeared. The music faded into silence, and I was pulled into darkness. It was not like falling. It was like being swallowed. The darkness was thick, almost solid, pressing against me from every side. I could not see anything. I could not hear anything. But I could feel heat. It started faint, like standing near an oven, but it grew, slowly, steadily, and the temperature rose with every passing second. My skin, or whatever I had in that form, began to burn, not with fire, but with pressure, with weight, with something that felt alive. And then I heard it, screaming, faint at first, like echoes from far away, but it grew louder, layered, dozens of voices, hundreds, all screaming at once, but none of them together. Each voice was isolated, trapped in its own torment. And underneath the screams, I heard something else, chanting. The same chants I had heard in the coven meetings, the same words, the same rhythms. But now, they were not calling anything. They were trapped with what they had called. The pull finally stopped. I landed, if you could call it that, on something hard and hot. The ground beneath me felt like cracked stone mixed with ash. It shifted slightly under my weight, unstable, as if it was alive. I tried to stand, but my legs were weak. I looked around, and for the first time, I could see. The place was dim, lit by a dull red glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. There were no flames leaping at me, no demons with pitchforks, but the atmosphere itself was suffocating. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Every breath I took felt like inhaling smoke. My chest burned, my eyes stung, and the heat was relentless. It pressed down on me, into me, through me. I saw shadows moving in the distance. They had no clear shape, but they moved with intention. Some walked slowly, hunched over, as if carrying invisible burdens. Others stood frozen, staring at nothing. And then I heard the music again. Not worship, not praise, but something twisted, broken. Melodies I recognized, my own songs, played backward, distorted, mocking. The bass lines that once moved people to lift their hands now sounded like funeral dirges. The lyrics I had written were being sung, but the voices singing them were hollow, empty, filled with regret. I turned toward the sound, and that is when I saw them. Musicians, singers, producers, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were scattered across the landscape, each one isolated, each one replaying their own performances over and over again. But no one was listening. No one was watching. No one was worshiping. They were singing to emptiness, and the realization of what they had done was written on every face. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But before I could move, I felt a presence beside me. I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. It was him. Jesus. I knew it was him, not because of how he looked, but because of what I felt. His presence was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was not warm. It was not comforting. It was truth, raw, unfiltered, unbearable truth, and I could not hide from it. I could not lie. I could not perform. Every wall I had built, every mask I had worn, every excuse I had made, it all crumbled in an instant. I stood before him completely exposed, and he did not have to say a word. I already knew why I was there. He lifted his hand, and the atmosphere shifted. A veil I did not know existed was pulled back, and I saw everything. I saw the night I was initiated. I saw myself sitting in that dark room, drinking that mixture, saying yes to the demon. I saw Siphokazi enter me, wrapping herself around my mind, my creativity, my gift. I saw every song I had written under her influence, every melody she whispered, every hook she planted, every rhythm she guided my hands to play. And I saw what happened when those songs were sung. I saw churches across South Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, Port Elizabeth, Pretoria. I saw congregations singing my music, hands lifted, eyes closed, tears streaming down their faces. They thought they were worshiping God. But I saw what was really happening in the spirit realm. As they sang, I saw invisible chains wrapping around their hearts, thin at first, almost unnoticeable. But with every repeated chorus, the chains grew thicker. I saw their worship rising, but it was not going to God. It was being redirected, funneled, pulled toward altars I recognized, the same altars from the coven meetings. I saw witches and warlocks standing around those altars, hands raised, collecting the spiritual energy that was being stolen from believers. They were using it for rituals, for sacrifices, for power. And the people singing had no idea. They thought they were giving their praise to Jesus. But I had planted a trap in the melody. I had hidden a curse in the rhythm, and they were singing their way into bondage. Jesus spoke. His voice was not loud, but it filled everything. You knew. That was all he said. 2 words. But they crushed me, because he was right. I did know. I had felt it. I had ignored the conviction. I had silenced the guilt. I had justified it by telling myself I was still helping people encounter something spiritual. But I knew. I knew the songs were not from him. I knew the melodies were assigned by a demon. I knew I was leading people into traps while standing on his platform, using his name, hiding behind his reputation. And now I was seeing the consequences. He showed me more. I saw the people who had sung my songs. A woman in Soweto who could not pray anymore. She tried, but every time she closed her eyes, she felt a heaviness she could not explain. A young man in Cape Town who used to be on fire for God, but after singing one of my songs repeatedly, He fell into depression and eventually walked away from the faith. A pastor in Pretoria, whose marriage collapsed after he introduced one of my tracks into his Sunday services. I saw families torn apart, minds tormented, believers who could no longer feel God's presence because the music they had sung had created a barrier between them and Him. And every single one of those lives I had touched, I had influenced, I had damaged. The weight of it crushed me. My knees buckled. I fell to the ground, trembling. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But the words would not come. Jesus continued, "The songs you wrote were not inspired by my spirit. They were assigned by a demon, and every person who sang them made an agreement they did not understand." I saw it again. The agreements, the soul ties, the covenants formed through sound. Music is not neutral. It carries frequency. It carries spirit. And the frequency I had been releasing was designed to disconnect people from true worship and bind them to spiritual forces they never intended to serve. He showed me the coven. I saw the meetings I had attended. I saw the rituals, the chants, the sacrifices. I saw the other musicians who had been initiated just like me. Some were more famous than I was. Their songs played on international platforms, and I realized this was not just a South African problem. This was global. The enemy had infiltrated the music industry, both secular and Christian, and was using sound as a weapon. He did not need people to stop going to church. He just needed them to stop encountering God. And music was one of his most effective tools. Then Jesus showed me something that broke me completely. He showed me the young musicians who had looked up to me. Teenagers, young adults. They had watched me rise. They had studied my sound. They had wanted to be like me. And some of them had followed the same path. They had been approached by the same producers. They had attended the same meetings. They had made the same covenants. And now they were trapped, just like I had been. I had not just destroyed my own life. I had become a recruiter, a gateway, a false shepherd leading lambs to slaughter. And I had done it all while smiling on stage, while collecting offerings, while being called anointed. Jesus looked at me, and his eyes held no anger, only sorrow. "You were given a gift to lead my people to me. But you sold that gift to the enemy and used my name to disguise his work." The truth of those words ripped through me. I had been given a gift, a real gift, music, creativity, influence, and I had prostituted it. I had taken what was meant to bring people into his presence and turned it into a tool of manipulation, control, and spiritual theft. And the worst part was, I had known from the very first night, from the moment I drank that mixture, from the moment I said yes to Siphokazi, I had known, but I chose fame over truth. I chose influence over integrity. I chose my platform over his presence. And now I was standing in the consequences, surrounded by others who had made the same choice. Musicians who had used worship as a business. Singers who had chased record deals instead of God's voice. Producers who had sold their gifts to the highest bidder. We were all here, not because God was cruel, but because we had chosen this. Oh, we had chosen the stage over the altar. We had chosen applause over anointing. We had chosen to serve ourselves while pretending to serve Him. And hell was simply the place where the pretending stopped, where the masks came off, where the truth was all that remained. I do not know how long I stood there. Time did not exist in that place the way it does here. But just as the weight of my guilt became unbearable, just as I felt myself beginning to sink deeper into the heat and the darkness. Something shifted. A light, not gradual, not soft, but sudden, violent. It tore through the atmosphere like a blade cutting through fabric. The shadows scattered. The twisted music stopped. The heat pulled back, and I felt a hand grip my arm. Strong, firm, unyielding. Jesus pulled me upward with a force that felt like my spirit was being ripped from that place. I did not float. I did not drift. I was yanked, torn away. The ground disappeared beneath me. The screams faded into the distance. The red glow dissolved into blinding white light. And then, impact. My spirit slammed back into my body with violent speed. My chest exploded with pain. Air rushed into my lungs like fire. My back arched off the floor. My eyes shot open. I gasped, choked, coughed. My neighbor was standing over me, phone pressed to his ear, shouting, "He is breathing! He is breathing!" I could hear sirens in the distance. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. My vision was blurred. My entire body felt like it had been hit by a truck. I tried to speak, but only a groan came out. My neighbor knelt beside me, his face pale with fear. "Stay with me, Thapelo. Stay with me. Help is coming." Paramedics arrived within minutes. They lifted me onto a stretcher, checked my vitals, placed an oxygen mask over my face. One of them kept saying, "We have a pulse. It is weak, but it is there." They wheeled me out of my apartment, down the hallway, into the elevator, out into the cold Johannesburg night. The lights of the ambulance flashed red and blue against the buildings. I could hear the beeping of the machines they had hooked me up to. I could feel the vibration of the vehicle as it sped through the streets. But all I could think about was what I had just seen, what I had just experienced, what I had just escaped. At the hospital, they told me I had been dead for 13 minutes. Cardiac arrest. My heart had stopped completely. By all medical logic, I should have been brain dead, but I was not. I was alive. And I knew why. It was not my time. Not yet. I had been given a second chance. Not because I deserved it, but because there was something I needed to do. A warning I needed to deliver. A truth I needed to tell. And I could not ignore it anymore. I spent days in the hospital. The doctors ran every test they could think of. They could not explain what had happened. My heart was fine. No blockages, no damage. Physically, I was healthy. But spiritually, I was wrecked. I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it again. The darkness, the heat, the shadows, the twisted music, the faces of the people I had led into bondage. I would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, feeling like I was still there. The nurses thought I was having panic attacks. But it was not panic, and it was conviction. It was the weight of 13 years of lies, compromise, and spiritual prostitution crashing down on me all at once. When I was finally discharged, I went home. But I could not stay in that apartment. The studio felt like a tomb. I looked at the keyboard, the monitors, the microphone, and all I could see was the demon standing behind me. I could still smell the faint scent of burnt flowers. I could still feel her presence. I grabbed my phone, opened my music folder, and deleted everything. Every song, every demo, every track I had ever written. Gone. I called my record label and told them I was done. They thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was, but I did not care. I could not create another note under that influence. I could not release another song that would trap another soul. I reached out to my pastor, The man who had trusted me, the man who had given me a platform. I sat in his office and confessed everything. The initiation, the coven, the demon, the assignments, the songs, the soul ties, the harvest. I told him everything. He sat in silence for a long time, just staring at me. I thought he would throw me out. I thought he would curse me. But instead, he wept. He wept because he realized how blind he had been, how many songs he had allowed into the church without discernment, how many musicians he had promoted without testing their fruit. And he wept because he knew I was not the only one. He connected me with a deliverance ministry. For 3 months, I went through intense spiritual warfare. Fasting, prayer, renunciation, breaking covenants, casting out spirits. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. And there were nights I felt like I was being torn apart. Nights where I heard voices screaming at me, threatening me, telling me I would never be free. But I kept fighting. I kept praying. I kept renouncing. And slowly, piece by piece, the chains broke. Siphokazi left. The nightmares stopped. The heaviness lifted. And for the first time in 13 years, I felt clean. But freedom came with a cost. I lost everything. My reputation in the industry was destroyed. Musicians I had worked with for years stopped answering my calls. Churches that had once invited me to minister now wanted nothing to do with me. My income disappeared. I had to move out of my apartment in Santon and stay with my mother in Soweto. I had no career, no platform, no fame, but I had my soul back. And that was worth more than anything I had lost. And I started sharing my testimony quietly. Small prayer groups, Bible studies, youth meetings. I did not advertise it. I did not post it online. I just told the truth. And something unexpected happened. People started reaching out to me. Musicians, worship leaders, producers, young artists who were being approached by the same people who had approached me. They had questions. They had fears. They had suspicions that something was not right in the industry. And when I shared my story, they broke down. Some confessed they were already initiated. Some admitted they had felt a demonic presence in their creativity, but were too afraid to speak up. Some told me they had written songs they knew were not from God, but released them anyway because of pressure from labels and churches. I realized I was not alone. This was bigger than me, and the enemy had built a network, a system, a pipeline that recruited gifted musicians, initiated them into witchcraft, and used them to infiltrate churches with music that sounded Christian but carried curses. And the church, in many cases, had no idea. They were so focused on what sounded good, what was popular, what brought crowds, that they stopped discerning the spirit behind the sound, and believers were suffering because of it. I began meeting one-on-one with musicians who wanted out. I walked them through the same process I had gone through: confession, renunciation, deliverance. It was not easy. Some of them lost everything just like I did, but they gained their freedom. And one by one, they began to change the music they were creating. They stopped chasing trends. They stopped copying secular sounds. And they started seeking God in their creativity. And the music that came out of them was different. It was slower, quieter, less polished, but it carried the presence of God. And that was what the church needed. I do not lead worship anymore. I do not perform. I do not chase platforms. I spend my time in prayer, in repentance, and in warning others. Not everyone believes me. Some think I am crazy. Some think I am bitter because my career ended. But I do not need them to believe me. I just need to tell the truth. Because what I saw in that place was real. And if I stay silent, more people will end up there. So I speak. And I will keep speaking. Until my last breath. If you are hearing this, it is for a reason. Not all music that mentions Jesus was written by someone who belongs to him. Test the spirit. Discern the source. Do not sing anything that does not lead you into true worship and holiness. Tell me where you are watching from. I want to pray for you tonight. And stay connected. There are more warnings people need to hear.